The Honorable Judge here, presiding over the Adventures in Random Courtroom. Today our prosecution is presented by
Caydor here.
And the defense will be provided by
Integer, over here.
Sky High stands accused of unsafe school conditions that purposely breed supervillains so that they may have someone to fight always. Let the proceedings begin.
Sky High is an environment of neglect and oppression created by adding a false dichotomy to the already cutthroat world that is high school. The only members of staff that seem to care are treated as second-class citizens because they have little to no powers. The ones that do have powers are clearly anti-heroes, and yet it is the morally ambiguous among them that are allowed to mold the ones with the most power. The existing staff is barely equipped to handle the various day-to-day nuisances that often occur as a result of teenagers having superpowers with very little fire suppression. In the event someone who controls fire decides to, burn something, students regularly use their powers to harass other students, and no one bats an eye when one student is trying to kill another student. The lack of safety measures at the school goes far beyond simple neglect. This environment is so bad, I would say they are trying to make students into supervillains to assure the world will always need their services in training heroes.
Could Sky High safety measures be a little bit better? Sure. But they are working with what they have. The repair costs alone to fix everything that gets damaged when two students duke it out must be astronomical. Not to mention stocking parts to make various raisin beams for the Mad Science Lab, fuel and repair parts for the flying rocket buses, and whatever they use to keep the full school flying keep costs up, which burns through their funding. They cannot help who apply to teach at the school. Superheroes enjoy being superheroes, and they seem to do it until they die, since we never see any badass old people who decided they would rather use their super strength, super speed, or other big-time powers to teach those with similar powers at the school. No, they are stuck with employing superhero washouts, such as Coach Boomer and Professor Medulla. The school had committed no crimes here since the real culprit is something that cannot be helped. Their own natures. We clearly see that every person's personality matches their superpower. Coincidence? I think not. Not to mention this hierarchy of students forms at every high school because it is an extension of our own natures to do so. I'll prove that these kids would have turned evil regardless of their supervision because their powers and their DNA compels them to do so.
Let's start with the star of the show, Will Strong. Will is clearly a product of his father's guidance. Stubborn and headstrong, and so badly wants his parents to be proud of him that he decides to go to Sky High anyway, despite not having any visible superpowers. Unless you count not breaking any bones after hitting a brick wall a superpower, which I do. However, as Will spends time in the hero support track, he learns the humility his father would have never been able to teach him.
It's me, okay? I don't have any powers.
But you never said... you made it seem like...
Like I had super strength, like you. But I don't.
But you will. You're just a late bloomer, that's what it is.
Maybe. Maybe not. But I don't care. Because really, the fact of the matter is, I'm proud to be a sidekick. Actually, I'm proud to be hero support.
Because his father cannot fathom Will being alright with simply being hero support. Then suddenly Will gains super strength with full-on invulnerability, which puts him into the hero track, and the sudden popularity goes straight to his head as he starts to shun his friends to accept the new superpowered ones exactly like his father would have wanted.
But what causes his sudden realization that he's acting like a terrible person? It certainly wasn't any of his teachers or his parents.
Huh?
Dude, you're so stupid. She's totally into you.
Not after tonight. Wouldn't be surprised if Layla or any of the other guys ever want to talk to me again.
Yeah. You must have been a real jerk. It doesn't matter what I do. I can't get him to stop talking to me.
Thanks.
And Warren most likely just kind of insulted him in his own way. Well, let's look at his parents. His dad has super strength and invulnerability. It makes him a very one-dimensional thinker. Move forward and destroy, with very little consequence to the damage caused. This causes him to think things like this.
When I was his age, I could put a truck on my shoulders.
Honey, I know you're disappointed. So am I. You think I didn't want to see my son fly?
Or have super strength.
Or fly? But we can't change who he is. Not without dropping him in a vat of toxic waste. Steve!
Oh no, where would we even find a vat of...
Steve!
I'm thinking.
Will is a great kid. This is not the end of the world. Okay, so maybe we won't be the Stronghold 3, the greatest family of superheroes the world has ever known. But we will be the Stronghold 3, the greatest family the world has ever known.
If it weren't for the more well-rounded perspective of his wife, he would probably be out looking for a vat of radioactive waste to dump on his only son. Bill's mom has the ability of flight and shows more three-dimensional thinking, seeing the situation from many angles, and picking the path of least resistance. Now back to Will. It is obvious that his personality shifts coincide with his developing powers. When he just has a slight resistance to breaking his bones, which I don't consider a superpower, by the way. He makes reckless decisions like going to Sky High anyway, and putting off telling his dad about his lack of superpowers, not seeing that telling the truth might be an option. Will then upgrades his superpower to super strength and full invulnerability, and his bullheadedness takes full form, using his powers to take a direct route of breaking things, hitting things, and even throwing things like his own teammate. Will goes after the girl he wants, brushing off his old friends, not even seeing that he was hurting them by rushing forward. Then suddenly, we see he half flies around a light pole and begins to see things from a new perspective, learning about all the damage he caused just in time to learn flight. When there is that many coincidence, we call that correlation.
What about Layla? She mentions early on that her mother talks to animals, and that is why she and her mother don't eat meat or animal products. Layla is also equally protective of plants, preferring to use her powers to make them grow for good things, like reviving them when they are dead and picking fruit to cheer up a friend, rather than have them smash through glass that, by the way, is way too weak to be used as windows for a school that both flies and houses people with super strength. This is clearly a sign that Layla's mom instilled great values in Layla, and yet Layla is deemed inferior to the superheroes because she believes in nonviolence. It seems the hero staff of Sky High prefers their heroes to solve their problems with their fist, and yet they reprimand them when they get caught doing so. So they can break the rules all they want as long as they don't get caught. Either Sky High wants them to be Spartans or the best supervillains they can be. And I don't see nearly enough spears, abs, or violent murder for Spartans to be the answer.
All of her philosophies have great gaping holes in them. If animals don't like to be eaten, then why do they eat each other? And I imagine plants don't like to be eaten either. So I suggest she starts enjoying food created in a laboratory somewhere, otherwise she'll starve to death. No, their philosophies are just excuses to cover up their natural impulse to protect the things they have control over. Leia's mom avoids eating meat. Leia doesn't like to use her plants in combat because few people have any hesitation to harm a plant. Gwen goes out of her way to recover the pacifier instead of making a new one. And we see Lauren offers to reheat food that is losing warmth and relight candles that go out seeking to preserve fire and heat. However, if you ask people why they do anything, they usually prefer to have a justification for their actions, to convince those that don't have the benefit of that connection, or that simply don't understand where they're coming from.
How did you do that?
I'm a technopath. I can control technology with my mind.
Wow, all I can do is punch stuff.
Yet he'll be the one on cereal boxes. Show me the justice in that. Miss Fernandez, kindly...
Speaking of Gwen, she became a supervillain the first time around because her only mistake was developing the ability to manipulate technology in an era where technology was very limited, making her seem inferior to those closed-minded who cannot see her potential. But she knew, and she made it her life's work to prove to the world that technology could match any other hero-level power. Then when she gets turned back into a baby by the explosion of the pacifier, she is raised to be evil by one of her henchmen. Sky High then corrupts her further, where instead of being happy she is recognized as powerful and worthy, she instead embraces the hate of hero support and pals around with other heroes instead.
Please. She resents what that henchman did for her. She resents hero support. She would happily drop her so-called friends along with the school if they lose or cannot get out in time. And yet she goes out of her way to recover the broken pacifier instead of building a new one, or a better one. She focuses her hate on the commander instead of, say, Jetstream, whose powers could be easily mimicked by technology. And you might say that it is because he has no problem ripping through robots, even though he would take down a living thing without killing it. But I think there is something more to this. Let's look at the fact that in her royal pain form, Gwyn is clearly meant to sound like a guy. Gwyn treats the pacifier like an extension of herself and her power. I mean, look at that thing. With that shape, a binky on the end, and it even creates babies when it finds the right targets. The Freudrine levels are over 9,000!
But Gwyn, like the rest of the ones who turn evil, were trained by the anti-heroes, and because they didn't have the benefit of someone like Mr. Boy training them, they ended up villains when they could have been heroes. Mr. Boy is a man so broken by the hierarchy that as an adult he still runs to find the principal instead of being able to handle the heroes in training himself. Any member of staff at a school for superheroes should have training for how to handle when one of the students goes berserk and tries to toast another one. One who, as far as anyone knew, had no superpowers at that point. Had it not been for the timely arrival of Will's superpowers, Warren would have probably murdered or severely injured him during the time it took Mr. Boy and the principal to get there. When Warren goes crashing through a wall, the anti-heroes barely take notice. Lack of railing off the side for what is a clear drop to the death, glass that doesn't seem to be shatter resistant, and 2 kids are left frozen for several days with no one trying to free them. So many OSHA violations at this school, so little time!
Mr. Boy's powers, if they exist at all, are marginal at best, but his job is to train and handle sidekicks. Had it been some sidekicks fighting and destroying property, he would have been able to handle it. We don't know whether he can survive fireballs, which are apparently deadly, or a super punch to the face, not pleasant either. So it is likely stopping them would have resulted in Mr. Boy's injury or death as well. It was heroes in training fighting, so Mr. Boy went to find someone who would be able to handle the problem with those sort of powers. Which, in his mind, was the principal. Since we never see Coach Boomer doing anything except talk and yell, and while Medulla does help the plot along, that is mostly just comes from him going, "Even as a baby, I'm smarter than all of you combined! Ha ha ha!" All of the teachers we see ended up as teachers because their powers barely make them super. And as they say, those who cannot do, teach. And those who cannot teach, teach PE.
Then let's take a look at one Warren Peace. His mother is a hero, his father is a villain, which makes him the prime example of what I'm talking about. He switches back and forth between being civil and being hostile, but all of the hostility is at the forefront when he is at school. It is clear that he has been given a hard time about his father and is ready to roast the first person to mention his father on any given day. Outside of school, no one knows who he is, and he doesn't have to play the tough guy to keep people off his back. So he relaxes and acts calm and friendly to Layla, and even Will, the kid he was going to murder a few days before. This is clear evidence that the school is at fault for allowing such things to happen.
But his powers also seem to be tied directly to his anger. And as he draws on more of his power, the anger grows, becoming more and more reckless with his powers, even charging headfirst at a guy holding a fire extinguisher, instead of just throwing another fireball. Clearly his powers affect his survival sense. We see the same thing in the other heroes and villains, as their powers make them reckless with them. Lash gets too close to the toilet, not expecting it to take him down. Speed is so busy rushing around he forgets to look for tripping hazards. Penny sees 2 clones as more than enough to take down an opponent with unknown powers. Layla goes out of her way to avoid using her powers for violence, even when it would be sensible and understandable to do so. Of course, Will takes invulnerability as an excuse to see how many things he should survive, which has been the downfall of those with resistance to damage, and even Will's mom gets into the action not paying attention as she flies, even though she knows she is flying towards a giant robot. We see this many times in nature, where something is given an unusual drawback, or predator to prevent it from dominating the food chain. Too much like losing a mouth when they reach adulthood, dying after mating, not being able to walk, only climb and leap, having mind control but lacking the ability to feed themselves, or even glowing in the dark while hunting at night. Nature finds a way to keep its creatures in check, and for heroes, It seems to be giant holes in their common sense.
Proper training can iron out those problems. Take Ethan, for instance, who is clearly a product of discrimination. His powers are excellent for stealth and espionage, allowing him to slip under locked doors and enter other places that having a solid form would restrict one from entering. Even without proper training, Ethan gets to drop on 2 heroes in training who have been using their powers to best other heroes and save the citizens for who knows how long. Ethan's powers are similar to, say, the kid with 6 arms, where if he has proper control over the aspects of it and receives combat training, it could easily be just as effective, and yet Boomer just writes him off as a sidekick.
Ethan's problem, like many of the heroes, is his personality. Since he seems to melt under pressure, and of course he doesn't show any spine until he shows more control over how his powers work, Coach Boomer has been doing this for years, and has to make a judgment call based on what the kids show him at the selection process. The kid with 6 arms showed him he could move all 6 arms, but Ethan didn't show any form of control over his melt form. He just melted, and that was it. Had he shown the ability to move, and maybe even get the drop on Coach Boomer, he might have made hero instead of sidekick. So, in Coach Boomer's eyes, he had the effective powers of an ice cream cone. Not to mention, we will see with Will, when someone in hero support shows that they have enough power to be a hero, they can be transferred to the hero track. So it is possible that after the events of the film, Leia and Ethan end up in the hero track as well, despite washing out a power placement.
It is clear Sky High lacks everything it needs to properly teach and handle teenagers with superpowers. But the question we are here to discuss is, does Sky High do this on purpose to keep the chances of students becoming supervillains roughly the same as them becoming superheroes, so that the heroes will always have someone to fight and the school will continue to have a reason to exist? I say it does. The number of safety violations and dubious goings on at the school is simply too high. No security or security cameras to help contain kids with a volatile combination of teenage hormones and superpowers with which to use to act on those hormones. The staff is ill-equipped and the fire suppression is inadequate at best. Nothing at the school seems to be built of anything resistant to wear and tear, with acid easily eating through support beams. The toilets have enough suction to possibly flush the kid who can stretch, and they don't even have anyone to show the kids who can actually use their powers. The implication is that they expect the kids to both have powers and to have been trained how to use them by their parents. But as we see, it is not uncommon for people to develop superpowers without having a parent with superpowers. I mean, Will himself is only a 3rd generation of superhero, so the powers can and do appear at random. Power placement in and of itself is a very polarizing process that takes kids who may barely have their powers and tries to sort them that way when it seems better to wait until they have been at Sky High for a year or two training with someone of similar powers, or even someone who can copy the powers of others. This would give the students an idea of the upper and lower limits of their powers before they get split into hero or hero support. Instead, they are barely trained, and both the heroes and villains show the worst signs of heroes and villains, not fighting intelligently. Why? Because it makes the battles more epic instead of the more intelligent side taking down their opponent quickly and effectively. The battles are drawn out. Sky High aren't training heroes who will one day save the world. No, they are training performers to put on the show of good versus evil so the world will always need them.
You talk a big game, as always, but what have you really proven? You say power placement is designed to polarize the students, but I say it is necessary evil, so that the students aren't taking on more than they can bite off. As I said before, the hierarchy and social circles of high school are caused by nature and appear at every high school, and in many ways continue on even after high school is over, because it is in the DNA. They say when someone is exposed to toxic waste, they either die or gain superpowers, and that some students with 2 superpowered parents may never get superpowers, while others may gain powers later. And so I must ask why. The answer is obvious. It is a mutation in the DNA. Some mutations are good and won't harm the host, while others are fatal. And then receiving the superpowers requires inheriting the right mutations, which is why the kids may have powers close to their parents, but not exactly the same. And to add to that, every person with powers has a personality to match it. So it stands to reason that the mutation occurs in certain points along the DNA strands, with the ability to control it coming as a mutation on the segments that determine personality traits, and the ability to produce the powers occurring at mutations along the physical level. With this being the case, then it is almost certain the ones that turn evil would do so regardless of any outside interference or teaching pushing them towards that side.
Well, that was our case. What do you think, Carrie? Post in the comments below whether you think Sky High is guilty or innocent.
Vote for me so he stops calling me a bum.
Vote for me, because I'm never wrong.